some of our presentations, one regarding the West Side Creeks, which I know we've been wanting to learn or hear a little bit more about that. And so good morning, everyone. Again, welcome to our virtual subcommittee meeting. My name is Monica Trevino Ortega, and I facilitate the community outreach for the San Pedro Creek Culture Park. To the subcommittee members, I have sent the PowerPoint presentations to you a little bit earlier this morning. So for those subcommittee members that are on the phone and not able to see your screen, you'll be able to see the presentations. As we've been proceeding since March of last year with this virtual platform, I'll be facilitating the meeting in order to avoid lag times and ensure usability of the application. And given the current state of public health, we're still following recommendations by the City of San Antonio and Barrett County. So our subcommittee meetings will remain virtual for the next several months. We'll let you know if anything changes before summertime. As a courtesy, I like to go over a couple of ground rules for the virtual format of this meeting for members of the public that are just joining us today. We ask that all participants remain on mute until each presenter has completed their presentation. If subcommittee members or members of the public have questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat feature at the end of the presentation, and we're going to answer those questions in order of submission. We take subcommittee member questions first and then questions from the public after that. So now we can move on in. So we do have a very heavy agenda today. And I'll move right on into subcommittee business right now before we get into roll call. So I wanted to share some news from our community partners about a call for entries for the Alameda Theater's Intermission exhibition. The exhibition will feature a series of 5 individual works of art produced by a single selected artist. And the pieces will be displayed on the plywood facade, protecting the first floor of the theater throughout the term of construction. So this effort is in partnership with Centro and the Alameda Theater Conservancy. And I thought I just saw Andy on here. There you are. Hi, Andy, our lovely subcommittee member from Centro. Did you want to add anything about the Intermission exhibition? I think you're on mute, Miss Andy. Let me unmute you. Uh-oh. There you are.
The story of my life on mute. But no, thanks so much, Monica. Yeah, and just quickly, we are partnering with the Alameda Theater Conservancy to do this open call. With the intermission, it's a temporary pause in, kind of bringing it to its full glory. So we decided the best way to honor it would be to commission some art from local artists telling the story about the Alameda. So it's past, it's present, it's future, and just again, giving it that respect, opposed to just, sometimes when you board something up, it kind of looks sad and uncared for, and we don't want the community to think that and at all, because that's not the case. It's going to be something amazing in a couple of years. So anyway, just long story short, this open call will be open until the end of April. You can go to our website, downtownsa.org, and the open call submission guidelines and entry is on there. So thank you, Monica. And if you know any artists, please tell them to apply. It's going to be quite exciting.
Absolutely. You're very welcome, Annie. We are so happy to support. Alrighty, so let's get on into our roll call. Subcommittee members, as I call your name, please either unmute your mic and say here, or you can also type in the chat box that you're with us today. So Jerry Geyer.
Here.
All right, Deb Bulmer Pro.
I'm here.
Okay, Miss Lourdes Galvan.
Here.
Veronica Garcia. All right, Joshua Gherkin. Or Ben Perry of UTSA. All right, Miss Kathy Meyer.
Here.
Good morning, Miss Kathy. Mark Penner.
Morning.
Okay. Friday Busille. He was on here a little bit earlier. Miss Patty Rattle. All right, and Miss Andy Rodriguez is here this morning. And Bobby Salucci.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ms. Patricia Seidenberger.
Present.
All right. We do have a quorum. And so let's see, we can move on into the approval of the minutes for March. Does anyone have any comments, or would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes from March?
I will. I'll make a motion.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All righty. For citizens to be heard, we did have a citizen share comments on the submission button for our emails in advance of this meeting, and I just wanted to address those. So Mr. Joshua Famery asks, can you fish in San Pedro Creek Park? And also, do you know if a dog area will be added in the upcoming phases? There's not many public dog parks in the area. So to address Mr. Famery's question on fishing, we follow city guidelines about fishing in rivers and lakes located in city limits, and fishing is permitted with a Texas fishing license. Now, because of the close proximity to urban features, parked cars, traffic on Cameron Street, and other pedestrians and pets along the linear park, it's not promoted. However, it is legal. And then to address his second question, currently there are no plans for a designated dog park on the project, but the entire linear park is dog friendly. So we do have the Paseos and the Culvert Park that will be constructed just north of Camp Street in phase 2 of the project that are pet friendly. So the nearest dog park in the downtown area is located in Travis Park, our neighbor, and that's just 2 blocks away of San Pedro Creek Culture Park. At this time, are there any other citizens or members of the public on our call that would like to ask questions or have any comments? Feel free to do so now. You can unmute your mic. You can also type in the chat box. I'll just give anyone a couple of seconds in case they would like to be heard. All right. I don't think we have any other comments or questions from the public. So now we'll move on to a very special presentation by Mr. Brian Mast. He is the River Authority Government Affairs Manager, and he's going to be presenting an overview on the West Side Creek's restoration project so that we can better understand how San Pedro Creek fits into this very large effort for those of us who are newer to the project, but it'll also kind of serve as a refresher for those of us who've been supporting the project from the inception. So Brian, thank you for joining us this morning, and please proceed.
Thank you, Monica. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. It's in putting together this presentation, I went back to 2007 in the project folders, and it's amazing the people that have touched the West Side Creeks project, including yourselves. You know, our former general manager, Suzanne Scott, was intimately involved. Certainly Roberto Rodriguez, our past board member from Precinct 2, as well as Ms. Galvan today. And then a lot of our engineers from the past have had their hands on the project, as well as city departments as well. So Monica, if you can go to the next slide, please. So this is a blast from the past. This was from the original, I believe, one of the very first meetings of the West Side Creek's Restoration Oversight Committee. As you can see, the July 8th, 2008 date. The logo down, the San Antonio River Authority logo at the bottom there, has a tagline that has been out of use probably from later that year. So it goes back quite a ways. And next slide, please. On this one, I want to note that even back at the early part of this, we wanted one of the primary goals was to generate interest in restoring the ecosystems of the West Side Creeks, of Alazan, Apache, Martinez, and San Pedro Creeks. Similar to what we have done on the Mission Reach, it wouldn't be quite to that scale of earth movement, but restore these creeks to bring back what was there prior to the flood control work that occurred in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And next slide. This is some of the background. Again, wanting to get trees back into the channels, still provide the flood control protection mitigation that we obtained through the channelization, but have a more beautiful natural creek-like setting for the community. We know that when the creeks were channelized, it cut neighborhoods off from one another, bridges were lost. And so trying to restore that sense of community and the ability to interact with nature, interact with the creeks. We know that was a big part of the history of the West Side. And we have stories that date back into the 1800s and certainly in the early 1900s that we learned about through the conceptual document process that I will speak to next. So here are some key dates or time frames for how the project progressed. September 2008, we initiated the Westside Creek's conceptual design. We brought AECOM on as the conceptual design consultant. And through this process, there were many public meetings. We also had the Westside Creek's Oversight Committee meeting, getting up and running. It was from January to May 2009, we created the logo that you see at the top right of that slide. And that was through a public process as well. 3 very large public workshops were held throughout 2009. And before I go too much further here, the other thing that struck me about the Westside Creek's ecosystem restoration project, and it was probably very similar for the Mission Reach and the Museum Reach projects, is we've been very opportunistic in identifying when funding opportunities would come and how we could start to implement the project and get momentum building to, ultimately get to a place where San Pedro Creek is under construction, and also the ecosystem restoration can move forward. And so in January 2010, we started talking to the community about Elmendorf Lake Park water quality improvements, and there were several iterations as to how that could take place. Finally, in August of 2010, we had the draft conceptual design report presented to the public, took in public comments, and about 9 months later, April 2011, we had a final document for that. Also in 2011, the Army Corps of Engineers were starting to look at how they could do feasibility studies on a quicker process. Prior to 2011, the Army Corps of Engineers, as many of you probably know, could take 5, 8, 10 years to complete a feasibility study. And that could also mean enormous amounts of federal dollars needed to get those studies completed. So in 2011, they were looking to do what they called 3x3x3 planning. And that meant a feasibility study completed within 3 years for less than $3 million, and for the Corps of Engineers to be coordinated between their district, division, and headquarters, everybody making a decision at the same time. So you're not getting multiple starts and restarts through the study. We had the Westside Creeks placed into that program, or accepted into that program. We were, I believe, the 7th study accepted into the program, and we were the only brand new start for a project that was accepted into the program. Our federal delegation at the time, led by Lamar Smith, were integral to having us adopted into that program or accepted into that program. And then finally, December 2011, San Pedro Creek, you all got started looking, based on what we had in the conceptual report, starting looking at what can be accomplished on San Pedro Creek, the urban core of San Pedro Creek. And that conceptual document really was the impetus for the Corps of Engineers as well. We developed a lot of fabulous information and data that could be used for that study to advance it along a more a quicker timeline than what would normally see. And next slide, Monica. And there's the report. If you've ever seen this or had a copy of it, it's 11 by 17 paper. It's a giant report, and the appendices are thousands of pages. Next slide, please. So like I was saying, we've been very opportunistic in identifying opportunities for funding to get the projects moving. And this is this slide demonstrates the linear creekway parks funding opportunity to get the hike and bike trails initiated, and constructed in advance of any ecosystem restoration that would take place. And this has all been done with they have been designed and constructed with the mind of ecosystem restoration of the creeks will take place in the future. And so the infrastructure that we're putting in today for those hike and bike trails are not going to need to be ripped up and redone, but can be added to in the future ecosystem restoration project, because there are some recreation dollars that the Corps of Engineers can spend in advancing additional recreational opportunities. And next slide, please. And so, you know, 2012, the 2012 bond for the city of San Antonio, we also worked with city staff. Certainly all of this has been flowed through the West Side Creeks Oversight Committee, and, you know, through Robert Ramirez's leadership of that committee, as well as Olga Lascano when she was a co-chair of the committee. All of these recommendations floated up from the West Side Creeks Oversight Committee to the River Authority staff. We worked with city staff to get recommendations, and then you see some of those initial investments represented there by what City Council approved. And next slide, please. So in June of 2012, we executed an interlocal agreement with the City of San Antonio to manage the sales tax revenue greenway projects for the hike and bike trails, as well as the improvements in the Elmendorf Lake Park area. You see a total investment there of about $15 million. It certainly has exceeded that. Or the Elmendorf Lake Park, that's the right total for the Elmendorf Lake Park. That doesn't include the amount for the sales tax venue greenway projects that you saw on a previous slide. And next one, please. So we're moving forward. We're getting designs done for the hike and bike trails. 2013 and 2014, we know SAWS has a consent decree to improve their wastewater collection system. And we initiate coordination with them, having a pretty good idea that some of the West Side Creeks, the infrastructure that have been either center line of the creeks or adjacent to them, will probably need to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. And so we initiate that conversation with SAWS, and that plays out even to today. On the feasibility study with the Corps of Engineers, we complete in the 3-year time frame in May of 2014, in that ends with the director's report, which is the Corps of Engineers' way of saying their director believes we have a good project, something that can be implemented, constructed, and have a national benefit as well as a local benefit. Finally, in 2014 of September, the Assistant Secretary of the Army approved that director's report, and we're getting incrementally closer to being able to say, okay, we need additional funding to move forward. In the background, I want to note that our primary funding request of the Corps of Engineers and our delegation at this time in 2014 is reimbursement for what we advanced on the Mission Reach project. we advanced the federal government, the Corps of Engineers, $61 million to have that project completed on time and on budget. It worked out really well, but the Mission Reach reimbursement to make Bexar County whole, our funding partner whole, was always the primary funding request up until fiscal year 20. So that plays in the background here a little bit. And next slide, please. So Elmendorf Lake Park project, it starts to get moving in through the bond, and we identify additional funds, $7 million from Bexar County for a total investment of the $15 million. This slide says $14,250,000. It ended up being a little bit more than that, the $15 million number that you saw earlier. And next slide, please. So finally, some slides that have some nice pictures to them. We've done some fabulous groundbreaking events and grand opening events, ribbon cutting events. And so Elmendorf Lake Park is getting officially started March 31st of 2015. You see Ms. Galvan addressing participants there. And next slide, please. All of this happening at multiple layers. Additional funding through the sales tax through Prop 2 is funding additional hike and bike trails. Through the initial funding, you see the blue lines that were under construction or completed. Those little blue segments were from the initial tranche of funds from the Prop 2, and those projects have been completed. And then what you see in red is what we are presently working on today, but for Martinez Creek, and I will get to that. I'll address that here at the end as well. The next slide, please. So finally, in August of 2016, the Corps of Engineers, it's a major cruise ship. It's probably the largest in the world, and it's slow to change course or make decisions. Great partners, but it can be a little slow process. And so at that time, the Assistant Secretary of the Army requested the Office of Management and Budget to release our director's report, which was necessary for the Westside Creeks to be considered for future funding. And at that, we would have to compete with other ecosystem restoration projects from across the country. And so in 2016, the Assistant Secretary of the Army finally made that request. I mean, that's 2 years later than that director's report being completed. Keep that in mind. Next slide, please. And then we had a beautiful January day in 2017 for the Elmendorf Lake Park grand opening. We had daytime fireworks, which is what you see in the top right, and then everybody looking up at them on the bottom left there. We had Councilwoman Gonzalez out there, Roberto Rodriguez, our past board member, Ms. Galvan. I believe the gentleman in the yellow shirt is Mr. Jerry Gonzalez, who is on our board today. So great turnout for that event, and the park is being heavily utilized. I believe the splash pad will be back in service here shortly as we're coming out of COVID protocols or being able to continue, be safe, but some of these facilities are opening back up soon. And next slide, please. One of the things that we knew that we would have to do is replace the pool, because with the park improvements, the pool that had been there was older. It needed to be improved. And so we received additional funding through the 2017 bond. And now in the next slide, I believe we have the grand opening for that, or maybe the groundbreaking. Oh, Martinez Creek Trail groundbreaking. That's Ms. Liscano on the left. addressing the crowd and everybody. I believe that's Councilman Nuremberg there at that time, with one of the shovels. Next slide, please. Alizon Creek Trail grand opening in June of 2016 as well. Councilman Trevino there, Jerry Gonzalez, Lourdes Galvan, Olga again, and Robert Ramirez, everybody there. And next slide, please. Apache Creek grand opening in July 2016. What I want to note here is we're going to come up to a situation with the trails that are being completed today happening in pretty quick succession as well. And with the COVID protocols, maybe we can get people back out on the trails to help celebrate these grand openings as well. Next slide, please. San Pedro Creek in August of 2020. So we're, a lot to be celebrated and a lot of work accomplished along the creeks as we continue to build momentum for the ecosystem restoration. And next slide, please. And finally, in October of 2018, the pool is completed. It was, certainly open in the summer of 2019 and available for the community. Unfortunately, COVID hampered 2020, but it looks like city will possibly be opening pools again this summer with some protocols in place. There you go. And so that brings us kind of to where we're at today with the construction completion of some of these additional trails that we've been working on. Zarzamora Creek Trail was going to be substantially complete this month. That's being delayed about 3 months for some coordination with SAWS. SAWS has some wastewater lines that they're working on in the area. We've been asked to put our project on hold so they can go through and they wouldn't have to rip up new trail. So we'll have substantial completion probably July timeframe here in the next 3 months. The Alizon Creek Trail is scheduled for completion this summer, and we look forward to having the community come out and celebrate. And the Apache Creek Trail construction that SAWS has been managing through a contract that they had on San Pedro or on Apache Creek, they're making some corrections to some initial issues with the trail, some ADA compliance issues that they had on the trail. Those are being fixed at this time, but that should be opening up here as well this summer or early fall. The one piece I want to note here, Martinez Creek Trail, it is fully designed, but we've been on delay waiting for SAWS to complete their sewer relocation project. And that project, as I said, we started coordination with SAWS back in 2013-14. Their project today has moved their infrastructure from the center line of the creek and moved it top of bank and buried deep enough to accommodate a future ecosystem restoration project. And so they've been great to work with. We had, many conversations about where that new infrastructure would be best placed and the depth of it. And they've been very good to work with. And so when we do get ecosystem restoration funding, Martinez Creek is in a good place for that future work. And next slide, please. So this kind of brings us to where we are today and what's going on in the community and federal appropriations. In December of 2016, finally, after the Assistant Secretary of the Army, Joel and Darcy, requested that the OMB release our director's report, they did so in December of 2016. And typical of OMB, they don't say, yay, thumbs up, go construct your project. They say they do not object to the Corps of Engineers sharing the report with Congress. So that sharing of the report did make us eligible for federal funding at that time. And so January of 2017, that's, we start those discussions with the delegation. Again, even at that time, it's an important request of our delegation, but it is our second request of the delegation for Corps of Engineering funding because of the Mission Reach reimbursement. Finally, in fiscal year 2020, through the work of Congressman Cuellar, Senator Cornyn, former Congressman Hurd, in the entire delegation, honestly, we received the final tranche of reimbursement funding, $26 million. That made Bexar County whole for their advancing the federal funds for the Mission Reach project. And one of the things that we've always said to the Corps of Engineers and OMB through that process is, it is the intent of our community to reinvest that reimbursement, reinvest those funds back into our creeks and river, make additional water resource funding decisions with that reimbursement. And certainly San Pedro Creek has seen some of those funds, and the Westside Creeks moving forward will likely see some of those funds used for local match as well. So this past fiscal year of 21, we were honestly disappointed. We thought we had set ourselves up to be in a very good position to receive our first federal funds for the Westside Creeks preliminary engineering design or pre-construction engineering design work. Congress gives the Corps of Engineers 60 days to develop a work plan, and that's the Corps of Engineers, absent of earmarks by Congress. The Corps of Engineers and the Office of Management and Budget are who apply funds to projects. And that omnibus appropriations bill was completed in December. I believe it was around December 18th, and maybe signed around December 23rd by the president. And from that point, December 23rd, 2020, they had 60 days to put together their work plan. And 2 days before the inauguration on January 18th, that work plan was published. So within 30 days, that work plan was published. And the outgoing administration certainly had a large influence on where Corps of Engineer funds would be spent for fiscal year 21. And ecosystem restoration across the country hadn't fared quite as well as it had in the past. And so we did not receive any funding through the fiscal year 21. Which brings us to today, though. We at least in the House of Representatives, Congress has brought back a what they're calling community project funding, and by any other word that would be an earmark, but it is at they have some parameters that they've wrapped around how this can be done, and each congressional member can only submit 10. And that's across a number of different funding sources, not just the Corps of Engineers, but we're primarily concerned with the Corps of Engineers here. So we have an opportunity. And the other thing at play here is the administration within the first week of taking office put out guidance to federal agencies about environmental justice and having that be a primary consideration in how they allocate or appropriate funds towards projects. And we've said from the outset in our work with the Corps of Engineers that the West Side Creeks have enormous other social benefits that they cannot calculate into the Corps of Engineers primary mission area, but that ripple from the project into the adjacent community and across our region. In the West Side Creeks, we have three, I believe by population, the three largest federal housing communities immediately adjacent to the creeks. The census data for income in the area, as well as health data for occurrences of diabetes. The community, the immediate near West Side community, they tick a lot of the boxes that are the Corps of Engineers and other federal agencies today are looking to enhance the environment of those communities and bring economic development into those communities. And we've been able to demonstrate through the Mission Reach Ecosystem Restoration Project that we can improve the aquatic ecosystem, but also have huge other social benefits for recreation, for additional investment in the immediate areas. And the West Side Creeks, even without a project fully designed yet, we're seeing some of that occurring as well today. And so we think we're in a very good place. Steve Graham and I, our interim general manager, have met with some of the delegation members, the acting assistant secretary of the Army of the Corps of Engineers, Office of Management and Budget, all earlier this week. We have a few more meetings that we're trying to get lined up to continue to press the case for the West Side Creeks to receive funding in fiscal year 22. And next slide, please. I put this in there solely because phase 3 of San Pedro Creek overlaps with the ecosystem restoration project as well. And so what is being designed there is with the thought of accomplishing the goals of the ecosystem restoration project that the Corps of Engineers will be engaged in as well. And so that has been coordinated very well with Carrie, Christine, and the Corps of Engineers through the permitting process. We're all moving forward together. I believe that's the last slide, and I'm happy to attempt to answer any questions. And if I don't have an answer, certainly get the answer and get back to you as well.
Hello.
Yes, hello, Miss Lourdes. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Brian. That was awesome recap of the past and, of course, now the future. I think the presentation will be very helpful to not only to us, but to the entire community, because one of the things that I keep hearing over and over again, when are they going to finish? When are they going to? So I think that this year, once we're over COVID and available to meet with the community and present the answer to what happened, how come we haven't finished, kind of thing. So I think that this is a great presentation. I am anxious to present this presentation to our new CEO, our manager, our general manager, because I'm going to be pushing and making sure that he's well aware of where the drive is in this community-driven project. And so, but you've done a wonderful job. I just have one correction. You kept saying Robert Ramirez. It was Robert Rodriguez that started in the beginning, right? Okay.
Yes.
I just wanted to point that out because he was very instrumental when we first started our initiative to make sure that the creeks were on the ballot by name. And so the bond was passed at that time for this beautiful project to get started. But other than that, I think you've done a wonderful job in recapping the past. And because I forgot some of those things. I don't remember all the dates, but this was really, really helpful. Thank you so much, Brian. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Ms. Galvan, and I apologize for misspeaking. Yes, absolutely, Roberto Rodriguez was the godfather of the West Side Creeks project for certain. I do want to note that our new general manager, Derek Bays, when he joins us, he's worked with the Corps of Engineers. He was with the Corps of Engineers at one time as part of his career, and he is very familiar with how they work, and that's going to be an enormous asset to bring to bear on this project. So,
absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to echo Deb Bollner Pro, our subcommittee member, states in the comments she'd never seen the history of West Side Creeks, so thank you for the chronological documentation. Are there any other questions or comments from subcommittee members?
This is Steve Graham. The only thing I would say to add to Brian is, you know, this effort with West Side Creeks is over 10 years old and probably moved in great earnest in the last 2 years. I can assure you we're always trying to have progress. Part of the problem, and I'm not trying to pass the buck on, but the Corps of Engineers moves the pace of a slow glacier. And so it's difficult to try to tell the community, yes, we're working the process, we're continuing to try to get funding, but it's true. But there is an $100 million pot of gold at the end of the rainbow if we're successful. So it's worth continuing to try to get the federal engagement.
That's a great point, Steve. The other, in putting this together and looking back at the history of the West Side Creeks project, you know, it's been different steps, different opportunities have been presented, and then we've taken advantage and worked with partners to get pieces of the project implemented. I look back at the Mission Reach and Museum Reach, and the San Antonio River Oversight Committee first met in 1998, and their celebratory final meeting didn't occur until 2018. And so it was a 2-decade process to get those projects fully realized as well. And so I like to think that we're going to be within that time frame, and I think we've set ourselves up really well to advance the West Side Creeks here pretty quickly.
Yeah, on the San Antonio River, we did the Museum Reach first. Well, actually, we did downtown first, then the Museum Reach, and that was not just by accident. It's everyone knew the federal dollars would come late in the game, and that's why those first projects on the Mission Reach didn't happen for 11 years into the process in 2009 or so.
Thank you.
Okay, can I say a few words, Monica?
Yes, go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, Brian, thank you very much. It's an excellent recap. We kind of follow the West Side Creeks periodically in this subcommittee since we're part of the West Side Creeks. But we also kind of follow them because it's very important, especially the linkage back to the trails and that whole project with Howard Peak and the gang when they started that. And I can remember well going in support with Roberto Rodriguez and Robert Ramirez and Olga and everything to some of those trail meetings in the beginning and telling them that we wanted to be part of it. And then later, Roberto Rodriguez and Robert and others were instrumental in getting the trails team to put us into the mix and not put the West Side Creeks at the end of the process. Otherwise, we would, and I'm not disparaging them. They have many things on their plate. They've done a fantastic job. But we were trying to get us into the mix so something could be done on the West Side Creeks all along instead of putting us at the very end. And I'm glad we did because of what's happened with the possibilities after the 1/8 cent sales tax was not on that election process before. So that's that, and it's an excellent partnership, and you guys have done a good job, excellent job. One of the things we have been concerned about in this project, the San Pedro Creek, is that we have a tendency, there's so much emphasis on us that we don't want to see all of the oxygen sucked out of the environment from the other creeks. And so it's always been in the back of our minds that how can we be successful and maybe become an advertisement for success for the West Side Creeks. Look, we're able to do this in this highly constrained environment, and just think what you can do in the other environment too. And Steve and Suzanne and the judge and everybody have been continuing to try to remind people that these other things are there, and they're very important. Another thing, in the San Pedro Creek little group formed in 2009, and the other there were people representing the 4 creeks in 2009, and we were small. We had about 4 people for the San Pedro Creek, and there was a meeting in 2009 where Robert Ramirez, Roberto Rodriguez, Rudy Farias, who was with Sarah, and myself, Rosemary, and I'll think of his name in a minute. He was very important to us at the time, Narciso Cano. And we were the little core group for the San Pedro, but the other people, there were little groups representing the other creeks, and we all participated in that conceptual study for the West Side Creek. So our little group goes back to 2009. We were not official until we had some backing, and we had the conceptual design concept and all that stuff that the county funded. So you're correct when we finally kicked off. It's really important. The other thing is, when you mentioned the Elmendorf Lake and those projects, there were 2 instrumental leaders in the community at that time that threw their support behind it. One was the mayor at that time, which was Julian Castro, in a partnership with the commissioner, Paul Elizondo. I remember Paul Elizondo coming to the West Side Creeks meeting one night and telling that group, because we were all there, that he and the mayor had come to some agreements, and they were going to find some seed money and get some stuff going. So you might, when you make that presentation, you may wish to put that in there. It was interesting too, because at the end of that meeting, I asked Commissioner Elizondo if he would schedule a meeting with our little group on the San Pedro Creek to come forward and see if what kind of support we could get on that. And people were not interested in this, in the core of the San Pedro Creek area at that time. If you go back and look at it, they were more interested in the part that would be natural and to the south. And so it was a learning process that Suzanne really to deal with the urban core of the creek, because it had always, in the earlier studies, going back many years, it had always been too difficult to, we'll pave it over, we'll put culverts over that part, and then we'll only have something to the south. And so over time, that partnership between the county, which you have not emphasized that much in your presentation, but that county partnership and that strong bond over time, and they're willing to provide some more of that seed money, pulled us along. So, Lourdes, I agree with you that this story needs to be told, and we've got to figure out where our publicity arm of the Sarah, and help with the county and everybody else to tell the story in snippets, with the media and things too. They can never tolerate a presentation this long, but they certainly can get some snippets and things that people can say. And there's a group of these things are broadcast multiple times every day on the channel, just a second, the cable company. And that kind of thing, that redundant thing is really good for the creek. So we need to put that in there if we can. So I'm sorry if I take up too much time, but I just think very happy that you're doing this. I'm very happy with the results. Robert Ramirez and Olga before too. Super job and such stamina to be here all this time and continue to work on this. And Steve, the Sarah group, again, outstanding work.
Thank you. And thanks for filling in the missing pieces. We always appreciate your comments. All right, I know Miss Christine Clayton has, you got to get her going here on her design and construction activity, and she'll need to leave here in a sec. So go ahead, Christine.
Thank you, Monica. I'm going to be brief just because I have to hop off, but just to give you guys an update on 1.1, you can see in the photo what the Venantiel has, what you've all seen for a while now. We had issues with the tile a while back. Now we have been able to install the tiling. You can see a picture on the right of what it's looking like. The tile is looking really good. We were out there this week to look at it. There's still just a few minor touches that the contractor is working on, but overall, we're about complete with that tile reinstallation. Next slide, please. Going on to phase 1.2, a lot of the work, as I've been mentioning, is on Houston Street. We've been working on the CDS units. The west one is almost complete, and they should be starting on the east side CDS here in the next couple of weeks as well. We've also been working on installing the railings in the gardens area off of Commerce Street. We still don't have an update for you all on the decision for the archaeological site. We're still working with the Corps, going through all the public comments and through all the research and all the design options. So stay tuned. We should hopefully have a decision soon, but not yet, unfortunately. Next slide. Jerry had asked us to kind of show you this aerial view. These aren't super updated, but they give you a good overall view of what the project is looking like. This is Houston to Commerce Street. You can see on the top right is the Houston Street Bridge and the archaeological site. Bottom right is the gardens area I was referring to, where we're installing railing. Next slide, please. Here is from Commerce to Dolorosa. It's a little harder to see from the aerial view, but you can see the wavy line on the top. That's where the 5-panel murals will be going, which Carrie Brown should have an update for you later on. Next slide, please. This is the block from Nueva to Graham. On the bottom of the screen is the new federal courthouse, and you can already see the channel walls starting to define the creek. So a lot of great progress. You see in the bottom right, those blue tanks. We're in the process of getting those removed here in the next few weeks. Once the ECDS unit on Houston is complete, we can remove those tanks and SUNT can get started on the bioretention pond, which is a neat feature that we're excited about. It's a great partnership between an adjacent property owner and the River Authority to incorporate some green infrastructure and help treat that water before it gets to the creek. Next slide, please. Moving on to phase 1.3 and 2, we still have a lot of utility work going on, specifically in Nueva Street, wrapping up the underground electric and the gas work. Should have the water line work starting here in the next couple of weeks. Just north of camp, there's what we're currently calling the Culvert Park, which you see here in the image. They're we're adding a new culvert, which you can kind of see in the right of the screen. They're pouring the walls for that new culvert. The Cam Street Bridge has been removed, and SUNT is now working on installing some of the substructure for that bridge, for the new bridge. And another one that Monica has started public outreach, but just want to remind you all, Alamo, the south half is pretty much complete. We're just finishing up some items and are expecting to switch traffic to the south half here by late April. So keep an eye out for that. Once we move everyone to the south, we can start demo of the north and move forward with completion of that bridge. Next slide, please. Okay, wrapping up with phase 3 and 4. One of the big milestones we've hit is we have submitted our initial design submittal to Union Pacific. As I had mentioned before, there's a railroad bridge just south of Alamo that needs to be replaced in phase 3. That is one of the longer lead times since you have to go through the design review process with Union Pacific. So we have now submitted the initial design. They have 6 weeks to provide comments. So we're expecting to receive comments from Union Pacific the week of May 10th. We are also in the process of receiving the 60% design plans for the rest of phase 3 and 4, which we expect to get from the design team here on April 20th. The other item we have to work with an external agency on is for our work underneath I-35. We had previously gotten an agreement with TxDOT for the Alamo work. We will have to go back and get another agreement for this work under I-35. We've already have a meeting set up with TxDOT to go over the plans and move forward with this agreement. Next slide, please. And that wraps up my portion. Any questions?
Any questions or comments from subcommittee members on Christine's construction and design presentation?
I had a question. I thought that the Army Corps was going to give us the results by the end of March. Was I mistaken on that? Or do I not understand the process that they're having to go through in regards to the church?
So really the only thing that has a set time frame is the public comment period. Everything else is kind of, what we're starting to learn is a little more fluid in the timelines. When we spoke to the Corps, they had indicated that they were going to try and get us the information by the end of March. They're still working on that. I think the first step that, there's kind of a 3-part process. They tell us, they basically confirm what elements are eligible and which ones are not. They give us the recommendation on the design option to move forward, and then they tell us what needs to be included in the mitigation plan. So we're working through some compilation of the comments. They have sent us some of them. We're going through and looking at them, and we're scheduling a meeting with the Corps to follow up on that and kind of discuss the next steps. So
you're saying we don't have the final results?
there is our goal.
I think Christine may have dropped off. They are. From what we gather is that they're still analyzing the data, Deb. And as Christine stated, we're trying to get a meeting set with the Army Corps of Engineers to go over that data and make sure everything is received and ensure that we get the right information as well as the process goes along. So not yet. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. Thank you, ma'am.
Monica?
Mm-hmm.
Is the lady, I can't think of her name, is the lady from the Corps of Engineers Regional Office on with us today?
She is not. Meeting? I do not see her on the call.
Okay. Deb, it's just, we're sort of in between. We talked about this, our team, in our pre-meeting to go over details with Sarah. I think it was the 1st of April, or 1st or 2nd. And we're just sort of we're not in limbo because, as Christine pointed out, they've already given certain comments back. So people are just working away on it, but it doesn't have a fixed deadline. So we're just going to have to keep on trucking with everything else we can do and hope that the maximum amount of flood control and other features that we really want to hang our hat on and are so important to us, that will end up in that design, and in that we'll be able to do the most with it when we get the mitigation plan. So
Deb and Lord, this is Steve Graham. Deb, I can give you a briefing Monday when I see you at our budget workshop. I'll give you a detailed briefing at that time.
Good. That's good. That's all we can do.
I couldn't get my mute off. Sorry.
All right. I think she's still on here. Any other questions or comments about Christine's update?
Good job.
All right, thank you. We will move right on to Miss Carrie Brown's public art update. Go ahead, Carrie.
All right, good morning, everyone. You can go ahead to the first slide. Obviously, Christine just presented on this, so I won't say any more, but here's another view of the work. As she said, it's looking great and coming along nicely, so we'll certainly keep you posted as all of this progresses. Next slide. So quick update on the 5-panel mural project. Again, this is between Commerce and Dolorosa. The call did close on March 24th. And we received 25 applications. Those are team applications. So a lot of artists were interested in the opportunity, which is great. Of those applications, 4 finalists will be selected, and those finalists will be paid a stipend to develop a proposal. We are estimating that those proposals would be due in the middle of May, but certainly I'll have a more detailed update for you all next month, but just wanted to let you know that things are progressing and we are moving forward with this project. Next slide, please. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about a new opportunity. We just recently selected an artist for the canopy at the Culvert Park. So on the left side, you see a rendering of that canopy and the 3 pieces there. So it has a great presence and you can see it from multiple angles. And what we did is we reached out to a number of artists from our pre-qualified list and invited them to submit proposals. And artist Ricky Ann Van Kirk was selected. The image on the right is her preliminary design concept. And I just want to say a few words that she said about the artwork. She said she was inspired by the writings of John Philip Santos, as well as the Aztecs, who called their origin and homeland the place of herons. She says of the design, visitors to the creek will find shade under a structure whose imagery is an ode to home, a nod to the creek's history and culture, and a celebration of the creek's natural and man-made surroundings. And just a note on the man-made surroundings, you might notice that the image in the middle of her preliminary concept is showing birds in flight. But if you look a little bit closer, you'll notice that the images actually reflect the shape of Ruby City, which is visible from the Culvert Park. So there's a really nice play on the nearby architecture in her design concept. So again, this is her preliminary design. We'll certainly keep you posted as this progresses, but our intention is to put this image on the underside of the canopy for all to enjoy who visit. Next slide. So just a quick note on some of our upcoming events. We are continuing with Monday Night Yoga. We are looking into starting in-person sessions in June. If that is the case, again, we'll certainly share that information with you. We are looking at partnering potentially with some other sites close to the creek. As you know, there's construction going on along Cameron Street, so we may be able to engage some of our nearby partners to use their space to do those in-person sessions. We have another episode of Get Creative coming up at the end of April, and we have Creek Fest coming up in May. I'll come back to that in just a second. And then in June, we have another episode of our Fit and Flow series. So for Creek Fest this year, it will be virtual. You may recall we had done this event first in 2019. Last year, we ended up canceling it due to the pandemic. So we're bringing it back this year, but it will be virtual. And we've got some really fun activities. A number of videos will air at different times over the weekend. We have one of those videos will be a commissioned puppet show by artist Sarah Fox. And so she'll be creating a virtual puppet show with flora and fauna of the creek. We'll also have demonstration videos for at-home activities, educational clips, as well as a self-guided tour of the green infrastructure at the creek. And so we're working on that now, but this will be a way to get people out to the creek to safely enjoy it, but also learn a little bit more about what they might be seeing as they walk along. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to do a quick recap on a recent past event. This was a scavenger hunt that we put together for World Water Day last month. And I just want to give a shout out to Nicole and Jeanette and Clint from our communications team who got all the graphics together and promoted this on social media. We had a lot of interaction. And again, a really fun and safe way to get people out to the parks. We featured artwork that were inspired by water. So we had stops at San Pedro Creek as well as Confluence Park and the San Antonio River. So it was a really great way, again, just to get people out and experiencing the park and maybe seeing it from a new vantage point. You know, maybe they're in previous visits had enjoyed the walking trails, but now they're coming close, looking more closely at the artwork. So it was a great way to collaborate with our internal staff, but as well as the San Antonio River Foundation. Next slide. I think that's it. Yep. I'm happy to answer any questions y'all might have.
All right, thank you, Carrie. We do have one question from subcommittee member Freddie Bustillo, and he asks, who are the 4 finalists for the 5-panel mural teams?
Don't know yet.
We have not selected the finalists yet, so I'll be able to report on that next month.
All right, thank you, Carrie. And then we have Ms. Deb Bolner, Pro Subcommittee member, asks, how is the project fixing the tiles coming along?
I'm guessing this is about the mural tiles. Is that right, Deb?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so we are in the process of getting some additional bids for the work. As I mentioned last time, we certainly will be replacing the tiles on the Joe Lopez mural. Those are currently in fabrication. But we did take a closer look at all of the other murals, and we'll be doing some minor repairs to those as well. So we're in the process of getting bids for that work, and we do anticipate all of that to begin probably in the next couple of weeks. So at next month's meeting, I'll have a much more detailed report on that.
Fabulous. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Any other questions or comments from subcommittee members?
Okay, Monica.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Miss Carrie, thank you very much for a good presentation as always. We just have to truck along on some of these things. And you've told us before that if we can keep the schedule you have now on the 5-panel mural, that will be okay time-wise. And we do want to point out to the committee or anyone else who's watching is that a lot of the schedules are going to be dependent upon what happens with the AME church in that area, because we're not going to have water coming down the creek if we can't do things up creek, so to speak, upstream, get those things moving. So that may actually give the artists and everything in the section between Commerce and Dolorosa more time if necessary, and everything just has to be adjusted around it. It's a fluid situation. And I mean, that means we're not going to see water down all the way down to Nueva Street either until we have it where we can keep it under control. But thank you, Carrie. That's excellent, and we're doing really great work. I want to point out something that if you guys watch the there's a program every Thursday night on public television that KLRN, it's called On the Record, and we have a lot of people that go there and have a short discussions with the host or the moderator. And last week, Judge Wolf was on there, and he was wearing his San Pedro Creek Alex Rubio tie. So I looked at it, I kept looking at it, I said, wait a minute. Then I looked over at mine, and there it was. So he's advertising for us, even under conditions like that. But thank you again for your good work, Carrie, and I know we're going to have great results.
Thanks, Jerry.
Great, thank you, Jerry. Are there any comments or questions from members of the public? You are free to ask questions as well. I'm sorry, we may have skipped over that for the design and construction update because I know Christine had to get off the line quickly, but any comments or questions from members of the public, please feel free to unmute your mic or type in the chat box. Just give it a couple of seconds. All right. Okay, if we don't have any other questions or comments, we'll move right into our calendar items. We still have Monday Night Yoga, as Carrie mentioned, April 12th and 18th and 26th. And then she has Get Creative with Grupo Azteca Teocalli on April 24th. And then on May 5th, San Pedro Creek Culture Park turns 3. Our grand opening on phase 1.1 was May 5th of 2018, and it has been a fun 3 years for us so far. We also have the community drum circle on May 11th, and then our next San Pedro Creek Culture Park subcommittee meeting is May 13th. Alrighty, and that concludes our virtual subcommittee meeting.
Monica,
Yes, sir.
Monica,
Go ahead.
I could be having a senior moment, but did we approve the minutes?
We did, yes. We approved the minutes a little bit earlier.
Monica, I don't think that you actually took a vote. You just
Take the vote, that's what I'm saying.
you got the motion and a second, but you didn't take a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we had Patricia and okay, yes, we can take a vote. Everyone in favor of the meeting minutes?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Good catch, Deb and Jerry. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. That we don't want to be dragging those minutes around any longer than we have to.
Yes. All right. Okay, so before we adjourn, are there any other questions, comments, concerns from subcommittee members, members of the public? No? Okay. If we could just get a motion and a second from the subcommittee members to adjourn.
Second.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week, a good weekend, and we'll see you in May.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.